Hey, hi. Happy Monday. So, I'm not talking about this 21-day reset right now. I actually am very excited. I'm talking to someone named Zibby Owens, who's written a book called Moms Don't Have Time To. And Zivi has plenty of time well, she doesn't have time. She has four kids and a husband, but she is, I think there's Zivi there. She very busy woman. And I was just reading the essay that she wrote in this book, and I'm excited to talk to her about it. Hi, Sibby.
Hi, Katie. How are you?
So nice to meet you. I think it's so weird that I've never met you because I feel like 6 degrees of separation. You know so many people I know. In fact, I know a lot of people who blurbed your book. Gottlieb is a friend of mine. I know Danny Shapiro as well. Everyone always likes this blouse, by the way, Libby, and it's from J. Crew like 4 years ago. But I just wanted to mention that. I am so happy to meet you, though.
I'm happy to meet you. I love Danny Shapiro. I'm so grateful to Jane Rosen for introducing us, and your blouse is adorable. And mine is from Faraday, in case you were wondering. It's actually a dress.
Where's yours from?
Faraday brand, Faherty. It's so amazing, by the way. Really cozy and awesome.
Adrian, who works with me, who's 24. I'm just probably too old for Faraday, but it's very cute, and I have so much to talk to you about because first of all, Zibby, you are pretty remarkable. Can I just say you've accomplished so much and done so many cool things. Tell me, for people who don't know you, and I think a lot of your friends are probably watching,
I hope so.
tell us a little bit about how you got started, your whole journey. You have four kids. I was reading your essay, which I love because you and I are so similar. We'll talk about that in a moment. I'm writing my memoir. I call it generational body shaming because your mom sounds a little like my mom, but I mean, your mom sounds like she was a little more on you than my mom. But tell me a little bit about what you're doing. You have a podcast, you do a whole website. Just explain the whole situation.
Okay, the whole situation is way back when I started out just writing some parenting essays. And then I got divorced, and I suddenly found myself with time for the first time in forever. All these long weekends with no kids, and it was so quiet. And I was like really not happy about that. And I didn't know what to do to fill my time. And advice I had gotten, as I've always done, is to read. Whenever you feel lonely, you just read. So I was reading. And then one time my husband said, you should take all these parenting essays that you've been writing and make them into a book. And I said, ugh, moms don't have time to read books. And then I was like, oh, that's so funny. I'll just make that the title of my book. But apparently publishers wouldn't have found that funny. That's what I heard at the time. And
I,
another friend of mine, Sarah Mlynowski, who's a middle grade author, said, well, why don't you start a podcast? And I didn't even know what podcasts were. So my husband, Kyle, and I sat on the couch right here behind you. And we were looking on my phone for the podcast button. Where do you even listen to podcasts? How do you do this? So I decided to use the name Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books for the podcast. And at first I thought, well, I'm always reading newspapers, magazine articles, and ripping them out and mailing them and forwarding them. I'll just read them on my podcast. And then I found out that was illegal. So I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll just interview some authors. And I only knew a couple authors. So I started with a girlfriend of mine from business school, Lee Carpenter, and she sat right here and I interviewed her. And I was like, wait a minute, I love this. So I just did it. I just kept doing it. The Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books podcast. And that's how it started. And then it kind of grew and grew. I started once a week. Now I'm doing 7 episodes a week. I just can't say no to, I'm trying to get back to 5, but then I'm like, oh, but I really want that book too. So I started with that. And then I also, should I keep going, or do you want to?
yeah. So wait, so from the podcast, this whole sort of online community grew, and you have a lot of people who are writing, sharing their experiences, not only through your podcast, but actually through essays that they write. And you've kind of started your own little publishing company, right?
Sort of. Yeah. So the podcast became live events. So I started doing all these author salons downstairs here in my house and getting people together. And then once I was getting to know all these authors, I wanted to get even more content from them. I was like, what do they have to think? What do they think about these different things? So I started asking if they would write essays for me. And I had this vision at the beginning, kind of like your whole, any Couric media system, but I was like, who am I? But anyway, so I thought I would commission essays and do like a goop for moms, something like that. And then the pandemic hit, so I decided to scrap the whole splashy website and just throw these essays up on my own zibby.owens.com site. And I called it We Found Time, because at the time I thought everybody had found all this time in the quarantine. We were all home, although frantic, but home. And I got them to write all these essays. And then after the summer, when I stopped getting the original essays, I realized that I had so many essays that it could be a book. So I put it all into like one Word document, and I was like, yes, this is a book. And so it became Moms Don't Have Time to, a quarantine anthology. Thank you. So glad you have it. Yay.
Honestly, I've been frantically trying to finish my memoir this week because it's due on Friday, Zippy.
Oh my, good luck.
To go through and look at some of the essays, and they're really funny. And before we talk kind of more granularly about the essays, you have 4 kids between the ages of 6 and 13. Is that right?
That's right.
And I'm sure you have a very tight community of moms who are really trying to do so many things. This is the first time in my life I've been so glad I'm old and don't have kids, because I used to pine for those days when my daughters were young and little, and I love a chaotic household. But honestly, I don't know how all these moms are doing it, Zibby. It's so tough, and it's so much pressure. And how are all these young moms handling it and getting along?
Yeah, it's been a long year. And I have to say, you're glad you don't have little kids, but I'm glad I don't have even littler kids.
Yeah.
Like age 6 and 7, my guys, they're on their iPads doing Zoom school, and my kindergartner, not so much, but they can generally hold their own. But I do have friends and even people on my podcast who have really little ones, and that is hard. The days are long, even longer than they were before. I just interviewed Erin Washington for my Moms Don't Have Time to Lose Weight podcast. She has a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at home, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you're doing it, but at least with my guys, they're a little bit older, but it's hard. I mean, as you know.
Well, you've got the homeschooling aspect and the virtual schooling, and trying to figure out when it's going to be in person, when it's going to be virtual, trying to work from home. Obviously some women are luckier than others because they have greater means and they can, depend on maybe their husband's income, but a lot of women don't. So it's been a really, really trying time. And I just want to salute all those moms out there, Zibby, because I think they're pretty extraordinary. And I wish I could do more for them, but I'm kind of out of that age range for, being kind of in these moms groups. But I want them to know how much I admire them and how much I feel for them, given all the things they have to do. And, we've heard a lot about this so-called she-cession, with so many women having to drop out of the workforce. And it seems to me that this pandemic may shake husbands and partners into understanding that they have to take up some of the slack at home. And it's not all on the mother's shoulders. It's not her responsibility to do all the things related to the home and to the kids. Do you think a lot of men are stepping up, or do they still not get it?
I think some are, and I think some aren't, and I think it's revealing a lot about people's marriages. My friend and author Liz Astroff just wrote this hilarious essay for my Moms Don't Have Time to Write website on Medium, or publication on Medium, about just that. Like, she's like, my husband wears a button down to his Zooms, so my kids think he works, so they don't bother him during the day. But because I'm a writer and I'm wearing my yoga pants, everybody's like, where's my grilled cheese? And like, I don't like my pasta unless it has like olive oil or something. And she's like, what is the deal? Why do I have to wear a button-down shirt for you to take my job as seriously as your dad's job? So I do think it's playing out in different ways in different homes. I'm really lucky. My husband cooks, and he just like made dinner for all the kids. And I was like, gotta run, I'm going upstairs. So,
Yeah, but I think it will kind of make people recognize the division of labor needs to be much more evenly split at home, especially when you've got a working mom in the equation. So tell me a little bit. First of all, I know you're going to have Anna Quinlan and Curtis Sittenfeld on your podcast soon, which is very So two people, I don't really know Curtis Sittenfeld. I'm a big fan of hers. And I do know Anna. In fact, I was just emailing her, not to name drop, but I was trying to figure out, oh, even a bigger name drop, where Princess Diana was sitting when we did this luncheon in Chicago for her. So anyway, but she's wonderful. Curtis Sittenfeld is wonderful. Of course, she wrote Rodham. Read American Wife, about the sort of Laura Bush story. So, you know, a lot of very cool authors really want to talk to you. What do you think it is about the podcast that is attracting them to it?
Well, I'm delighted that they're coming on because both of those authors had said no before. Now they're saying yes. So I feel like, and I just like don't give up on like some people who I really want, like Anna Quinlan, and has been on the top of my list since the beginning. So I think, you know, I mean, I'd love to say it's my charming personality, but I think it's the fact that it's now getting so many more views and downloads and attention, and people want to be a part of that. And hopefully it's true that when I have someone on my podcast, it helps them sell books. And having just had a book come out, I know how important it is for anyone to kind of champion your book, like us right now. And so I think people really.
You know what I was going to say, Zibby, that's so clear is it's very clear to me just from leafing through these essays that you built this very special community of women who speak in a very, who write in a very unvarnished way. You can definitely hear their voices. And tell me a little bit about the book, because it's really divided up in sections. Moms don't have time to read. Moms don't have time to exercise or work out. Moms don't, tell me about that and how you kind of organized it.
Well, at the beginning, I tried to identify the top 5 of the zillion things that moms don't have time to do. And P.S., it's not only just for moms. It's really anybody who's super busy, and also anybody who's a caretaker in any way. I mean, there are essays in here like by Alyssa Altman, who wrote about taking care of her elderly mother, and there are essays by men. So it's not just moms. It's really all of us who are busy caretakers, but that's too long a title.
Yeah.
Busy caretakers don't have time to, just does not.
Caretakers, men and moms who don't have time for whatever. Anyway.
So I narrowed it down to the ones that I thought were the most relevant. Moms don't have time to eat, work out, breathe, have sex, and read. And based on all my podcast interviews, I could figure out which authors might have something really interesting to say on one of those topics. And then I wrote a bunch myself, one for almost everyone. And then I went to my next 5 for my next anthology, which is coming out in November. And those 5 are Moms Don't Have Time to Sleep, See Friends, Get Sick, Write, and Lose Weight. So I feel like with those 10, we've got a lot of stuff covered. Although I must say, a lot of moms told me the thing they didn't have time for the most was drinking a cup of coffee before it got cold. So then I started, and I didn't think there were too many essays based on that, but I did start researching like the best cups that would stay warm. And there is like a Hydro Flask mug that will keep my coffee warm all day. So I'm like, I've discovered that.
Those little things you can buy like from Brookstone, and you put your coffee cup on it. And you're right, there are those coffee cups, because I think my husband's daughter gave one as a Christmas gift one year. Yeah.
Well, there you go. So that just was like a product solution. And the rest, I commissioned a lot more essays, and I worked with editor Carolyn Murnick on it. And we have amazing authors who are coming for the second anthology, and fantastic authors for this one. So it's just been great. And I think ultimately, the things we don't have time for in life, that's what makes life worth living, right? If we don't do all these things, what are we doing? And that's why I thought it was funny to make my next book title, Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Because it's like, we're so busy. How can we even be moms? You know what I mean? So anyway.
I remember a t-shirt when I was in my 20s, which was Roy Lichtenstein, or Steen, I don't know how you say it, but it was like, oh my God, I forgot to have children. Which moms lament back then, where people really felt like they had to choose one or the other, and women were just starting to fully integrate their work life with their home life. So do you have a favorite essay in the book?
One of my favorites is by Renee Denfeld. It's called Food Can Hurt, and it was about how she grew up homeless and in such dire straits that getting a job at McDonald's basically saved her life, and now how her experience of food has become this very sensory experience on so many levels and deeply meaningful to her. And it was so beautifully written. I don't like to choose favorites because they're all really good.
Yeah.
That was like a super literary, like just beautiful one that I think about a lot. So I have to.
And yeah, tell me about the one that you wrote that sort of resonated most with you in this edition or in this book in particular, because I know you've got more coming out.
Well, I wrote a piece about my marriage to my husband, Kyle, and how I had gone on vacation with him for one of my first trips without my kids, which was painful on the one hand because I had a very hard time being apart from them, but also exciting because here I was in this new unexpected love relationship at age 40, which I never saw coming and which was like really exciting. And I ran right over to the s'mores station at this resort that we were at. And of course I was the only mom without her kids, but I was like, move out of the way. I'm coming to make s'mores myself. There was this mom around the fire pit and she was so frazzled and her kids were like all over her. Her husband was like worthless on the side, not doing anything. And she just looked at me in the way that Kyle was looking at me, and we were having so much fun. And she was like, what I wouldn't give for that feeling for 1 second. And so I said to her, I was like, no, I didn't have this. This is new for me again too. Like I have this feeling like it doesn't have to be like this. So I had all this positive association with s'mores, and then flash forward to the pandemic and we're in the house with the kids. I'm doing laundry nonstop and Kyle makes a s'more for me and brings it up, and I'm literally she was 7 years old at the time, well she's still 7 anyway, and I'm folding her like tiny little tank tops in the closet and he brings me this s'more. And I was like, oh no, I can't, I'm so busy, like what are you doing, why are you bringing me a s'more right now? And he's like, I made it just the way you like it, like it's perfect. And I was like, forget it. And I didn't eat it. And it was so stupid. And he left it like next to my bed. And I found it 2 hours later once I'd finished all the housework or whatever. And I just wanted to cry. And I was like, that was so stupid. Why did I not eat the s'more? Like, what am I doing? So I threw it away the next morning and I just realized, like, you know, these butterflies that you get in the beginning of a relationship, you know, he was so worried that the butterflies, or I was worried the butterflies would go away. And was it me who was really crushing them myself? So I resolved then to stop getting so caught up in the chaos of the moment and focus on what really matters. Although I probably just did the same thing again tonight. So sorry to Kyle, but.
Well, take time out to eat the s'more if your husband makes you a perfect s'more.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Let me ask you about this fellowship program you started for new female memoirists.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, Zibby, and why you wanted to do that. And I just like to say the name Zibby because it's such an unusual name. Is it short for something?
It's short for Elizabeth.
Zibby. But are there a lot of Zibbies out there?
There are not, although I have found them on social media now. In fact, I have a new friend named Zibby, Zibby Wentz. Anyway, yes, it's. I really was not happy having a nickname for like my entire life, but a friend in my playgroup couldn't pronounce Elizabeth, and she called me Zibbeth, and my parents shortened it to Zibby when I was 1, and it has stuck ever since. So
cute, and I like saying it. But anyway, tell me about this fellowship.
You can say Zibby as many times as you want. I will not stop you. Keep going.
I say people's names. My assistant Adriana, who's lying here on the floor while we're doing this, says I always say people's names a lot, and I think it's a way to create a feeling of intimacy and trust and kind of fellowship. So I think I just tend to do that, but your name is particularly fun to say. But anyway, all right, getting back to my questions, Zibby, what is the fellowship program?
Well, Katie, let me tell you about it. And actually, this is the first time I'm talking about it anywhere, so I'm very excited.
Exclusive.
Yes, you got the exclusive. How lucky. I'm calling it the Moms Don't Have Time To Fellowship, and I am picking 2 to 4 authors every year, women debut memoirists, to basically sponsor. And I will provide them with a book editor, and I have 2 editors who I'm going to work with, Carolyn Mernick and Lee Newman, who are both fantastic authors and editors. And they're going to help these 4 women who I've chosen whip their books into shape, and I'm going to help them and they're going to help them work through how to pitch a book, how to get an agent, how to do their book proposal, and see them through the process. And I'll also I'll provide an episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, and an article on Moms Don't Have Time to Write, and an event with all these authors, and do everything in like my little brand universe to promote them. So I'm so excited.
That's really exciting. And how will you pick these aspiring memoirists?
I already picked them. I have 4 for my first year, the 2020.
What was the process like, though? What were you looking for, and what were their requirements?
Nothing was quite so formal. But over time, as I've gotten to know more people, I keep saying to people like, oh my gosh, you should write a book, or you should write a memoir. And like, I can't wait to read yours. But all these authors are aspiring people. I'm like, you have a story to tell, you should do it. And I've kind of stored that away. And I debated and almost, to be honest, started my own imprint or my own publishing company. And then I was like, okay, that's like a full-time job. I don't have time to do that. But I still really want to promote these authors and get their stories out into the world, especially these like wonderful women's stories that other people deserve to hear and that they should write. So the 4 women I chose, I knew from all different ways. Megan Jarvis has a blog called Grief is My Side Hustle. I got to know her through Zibby's virtual book club, which I started during the pandemic. And she specializes in grief. She's a trauma therapist, and especially now, helping people cope with their grief is so relevant. And she's just like this soulful, awesome therapist, counselor. Anyway, so she has a great book that's almost done. She's a first draft. Christina Aleshi is a former CNN field reporter. She's first generation American from a Sicilian Roman family, and developed adult onset diabetes, and has basically always been told no throughout the course of her career. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. And she has risen above, and now she's the chief communications corporate affairs officer at Chobani, and has just basically risen through and dealt with so many obstacles. And I love stories about people overcoming obstacles. And then Maria D'Angelo is going to write about her own journey through all of the obstacles that have come her way. She's a Cuban immigrant. She's a SoulCycle instructor. She's a lawyer. She's like a zillion things, and she has an amazing story. And also Reverend Lydia San, who was one of my first podcast guests. She's one of the youngest Asian American ministers in California, and she like won all sorts of prizes and just decided, I'm tired of being perfect. I have to choose another path. And so she's like a recovering perfectionist, writing about her story. So those are my first 4 fellows, and I'm so excited to work with them about it. There's no real process. I don't know how I'm going to do it going forward, but I'll deal with that later. But now March 1st is the start of Women's History Month. So I'm ready to like make history with these 4 women.
That's so awesome that you're doing that, Zibby, and paying it forward and helping support these incredible women whose stories, as you say, are definitely worth telling. I was reading my research on you, and speaking of grief and your the first author, you lost your mother-in-law to COVID, and her mother also died. Is that right? Of COVID, both of them?
Yes, both of them.
And so many people have lost loved ones. We've been trying to honor them, through my social media channels. And I know that the proceeds from the book are going to a special place, a program for vaccine research, and it's named after your mother-in-law. So can you share with us the experience of losing her and what that ordeal was like, if it's not too difficult?
Yeah, no. First, Nini, who was my husband Kyle's grandmother, passed away. She had a lung condition, went into the hospital for a treatment for high blood pressure, caught COVID in the hospital. They didn't give her a COVID test. This is a very small hospital outside Charlotte, North Carolina. So she came home and gave COVID to Susan, my mother-in-law, before they even knew she had it. And Nini had to go back to the hospital. Meanwhile, Susan was at home, burning up with fever. And at the time, Kyle and I already were trying to figure out how to get Nini out of the hospital, what to do with Susan with her fever. She didn't want to go to the hospital. She ended up having to get dressed in a hazmat suit and stuff the suit with ice packs to go visit her mother to say goodbye when she was readmitted and was dying of COVID, which she then passed away, which was terrible, obviously. So then Susan, by the way, who was 63, in phenomenal shape, she had been divorced pretty recently, had like a new boyfriend, and just like was full of life and the most giving person ever, like would give you the shirt off your back and was just like full of bev and life verve and everything. So she was super sick. I got her like a telemedicine appointment. I had her like up on an iPhone, but eventually she had to go to the hospital. She spent the next 6 weeks in various hospitals. First, she went in a small hospital in Charlotte. Then they moved her to the bigger hospital. She did her whole course of remdesivir and everything, and it just kept progressing. And after 3 weeks, she ended up, even though the COVID itself had gone, it had caused so much damage in her lungs that she went on a ventilator. She was in the ICU, and then everything just kept going wrong with infections, and just everything kept going wrong. We ended up airlifting her to Duke University Hospital, where she was put on an ECMO machine. And the last 3 weeks, but then had several strokes, and time just ran out. Her lungs just wouldn't heal in the time. You can't be on an ECMO for that long, and her lungs didn't heal fast enough. And it was terrible. And our life was every 3 hours, phone calls with doctors, nurses station calls, stopping everything. You know, all summer was just measured in these small increments. And, you know, I tried to take on all the medical stuff, not that I'm a doctor, but, Kyle's sisters were so emotionally invested, and when you're in that haze, it's hard to sort of think straight. So I was trying to always sort it out and take notes and figure out what to do next, and doctors, and I'm on the board of Mount Sinai, so here in New York, so I would have doctors from here consult with doctors down there, and nothing I did worked. Like nothing anyone did worked. And meanwhile, I was, until the end, we were texting with Susan and calling her all the time, and she was like, you got to get me out of here, do anything you can to save me. It was awful. I mean, it's just awful. And
so she was healthy, no underlying conditions or anything like that?
No. She shouldn't have died. Should not have died. It's yeah, it was terrible. And so at the very last minute, they let Kyle and Stephanie go say goodbye. So they went into the room, and I was in the car downstairs, and then we just like sat in this hotel room at Duke with Susan's 2 dogs and just waited that afternoon until they called and said she had passed away, at which point the 2 dogs, who had never fought, started attacking each other in this hotel room, and Stephanie's sobbing. I mean, it was terrible. I can't believe I'm even telling this story. It was so awful, and so raw and brutal and just terrible. And then we all went back up here to, out to Long Island, and we inherited Susan's dogs, and Kyle and I have taken the black lab Naya, and Stephanie took Luna, and she moved here to New York, and their dad, they're divorced, but he had been stuck in Holland for months and months. So finally he came back. So he's here with his fiance, and now we're still like rebuilding. And Kyle, I've just like watched as Kyle and Stephanie have grieved so much and tried to assist.
It sounds like this is definite material that might be good to write about when you're ready. But
I have written about it. I wrote a whole long essay about it on Medium. I think I called it something like I had to buy my sister-in-law a bra because she like didn't have any clothes. So there I was, like, bra shopping. Like, I don't know, what kind of underwear does she like? I have no idea. The things that happen when someone's sick for so long and your life is so uprooted. But anyway, after all that, I decided to start the Susan Felice Owens program for COVID-19 vaccine research at Mount Sinai. And they're in the process of developing a low-cost vaccine, which is administered in 1 dose through the nose and can be stored at higher temperatures. So all the proceeds of my book are going there, and I had a fundraiser launch event, and I hope I can announce this. I'm going to be partnering with Citizens for Humanity, and they're like making a t-shirt. They're going to donate all the proceeds to that, and I'm still trying to find ways to raise more money for that.
You should have told me. I should have actually we should have thought of this, Adriana. We could have made this a fundraiser too. I interviewed Beto O'Rourke the other night. We were like, we could have raised money for the people of Texas. And I did something else with a really cute chef named Jake Cohen, who I just think is adorable on Instagram. And we raised money for the World Central Kitchen that was doing so much work in Texas. And we could have done this for your mother-in-law, but this is kind of a cool way. There's a whole way you can raise money through Instagram lives, and people are so generous. And maybe some of the people you're interviewing, you could do both for the podcast and on Instagram and turn it into a bit of a fundraiser, especially.
She has to get the organization certified by Instagram.
You've got to get the organization certified by Instagram, but that's something cool to do. And we raised, I think, almost $10,000, $8,000 for World Central Kitchen, just making a kale salad with butternut squash. Who knew, right? I mean, fun. So you should do that too. That's so nice of you that you're doing that. And I'm sure your husband and his family are really grateful, because it sounds like it was and still is incredibly traumatic. On a lighter note, as we used to say on the Today Show, as we would switch from like a terribly sad topic to like what jeans look good on what figures. Somebody said that, well, actually, this isn't such a lighter note, Zibby. This is you had COVID as well?
I did. Yes. Yeah, I know. It's like the irony of the fact that I got COVID right before my book launched, when the whole thing was like a quarantine anthology and all the proceeds were going to COVID research. And then I got COVID right before the book came out. I couldn't believe it. I was like, is this a joke? Anyway, yeah, I spent 9 days in bed. I did all my first week of book publicity events from my bed with like my step stool on my legs and my laptop propped up. And I was like, well, I'm just going to do it from bed. And I would do a book event and then I would shut the laptop and like go back to sleep. Yeah. And it was terrifying, of course, particularly for my husband, who thought, for sure I was going to die. And he was like terrified. And my kids had to go with my ex-husband, and except for my daughter who was here. And yeah, it was really scary. And I had all this vertigo for 2 days. I just have this new respect for everybody who suffers from any symptoms. And of course, there's the fear with COVID that it's not going to go away, right? You hear about all these long-term symptoms. And I got it.
They're called long haulers. And we started covering this at the very beginning of the pandemic. I have a lot of friends who are doctors, and they were saying these symptoms, and I had a friend who I used to work with, his wife like just wasn't getting better and nobody was taking her seriously. A lot of the doctors, I mean, I think in fairness to all the people in hospitals, they had their hands full of just trying to help patients as best they could. But you had these people suffering with these long-term effects, much more than just not being able to taste or smell, although that's pretty upsetting when that happens to you, but all kinds of things. So have you had any long lasting effects, or is it too early in your recovery to say that?
I don't think it's too early, because I don't have any effects. I mean, knock wood, but I feel like I'm 100% better right now. I don't have any symptoms. My taste and smell came back. I'm not dizzy anymore. Everything seems to be back to normal, thank God. But I have to say, I got it from my babysitter, who's 30, and we were like back having to go get a CAT scan on Friday because she was having so much pain breathing, and she's had it longer than me. So you just don't know. You just don't know.
Well, but I'm glad that you're doing better. I'm sorry that happened, but thank goodness. Because it seems, I think one of the scariest things about COVID is the unpredictability of it. You just don't know. And I guess I'm sure they'll do so much more research. What is it about different people's biology that makes them really succumb to it? Is it blood type? Is it, a lot of pre-existing conditions we're not even aware of, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that are happening that you just don't know in your body. So I'm just glad that you're well, and I really hope we're on the other side of that. Or you probably aren't eligible to get a vaccine, and will you be eligible to get one because you've already had it?
I hope so. I mean, I think you have to wait a certain amount of time after you have it, but I'm not even on the list. I mean, I'm 44. Well, I mean, eventually I'll get there. I
Yeah.
don't have pre-existing stuff, and I'm not a healthcare. I don't quite. I'm like, why am I in none of these buckets? Nothing applies to me.
No, listen, this is the only time in my life I wish I were a year older because
Oh,
I cut off. And yes, you know how old I am, everybody. Well, somebody asked from social media, what do you do when you feel completely overwhelmed from being at home with your kids? Any advice for parents stuck at home and struggling to find balance?
oh man, I read. That's how I get out of my own life, basically. I love to read. I read all the time, even if I just read an essay or a few pages of a novel or a few pages of a memoir. That's for me the fastest way to escape. So when I'm in a particularly stressful kid situation, like sometimes like I really used to lose it when I would be so tired and the kids just would not go to bed. And I would just sit there like waiting, like fall asleep. And now I'm always reading while I do that. And they know, like, okay, it's bedtime. Wait, hold on, I'm gonna go get my book. And then it doesn't matter as much, right? Because I'm already doing something. And then I can talk to them about it. Oh, what are you reading? And then, oh, this is the book about, whatever. So I know it's not realistic necessarily to delve into like 1,000 pages of reading and something
Right.
really, but it doesn't have to be heavy. So that's for me.
This book is so awesome, Zibby, because honestly, okay, I'm selling books for you because it goes for such a great cause, and I would sell it anyway. But you guys, I think what's so wonderful about this book is they're very digestible. You know, you could just read an essay. I've never been a person who reads like when you're on the toilet, but you could read these when you're on the toilet, and you could read them, if you just are tired, but you want just something, because it does feel like cuddling up with a good friend, because I just think the essays are so great. And so I highly recommend this, everybody. Buy Zibby's book. And before we go, because I have to finish my book, Zibby, and it's due on Friday. But, what advice would you give people? First of all, I have two more questions, and I'm going to stop. Number one is, what advice would you give people who really would like to write? And I think it's so true what you said. Everyone has a story. I think this is one thing that has kept me curious and engaged and alive, honestly, is I'm interested and curious about everybody's life. And I think everybody has a story that's worth telling. So what would you recommend for people who really want to tell their stories, but they don't think they're interesting enough, or they don't think they have anything to say? And don't say journaling, by the way.
I wasn't going to say journaling. And by the way, the reading on the toilet thing I have now thought of all these new marketing things like toilet paper with this book. And, now that you've said that, I'm going to have to figure out a way to like make that into some sort of marketing strategy. But
I know moms don't have time to go to
yeah,
the, wait, is that already, do you have that already?
no, but you know what? That's going to have to be my third anthology because that's a great title. Thank you. Thank you for that. You can have the cover blurb. How about that? I'll save it for you.
Good.
Perfect. I would say I completely agree with you. I am totally inspired by stories. Everybody has a story. That's life. That's like there's a story just from like going around the corner. There are all these things you observe and think and feel, and everybody deserves to get it on paper. I mean, the act of putting your innermost thoughts and feelings, or even just observing something or making up a story, getting it on paper is this amazing, liberating, and connective experience. It's like the best way to connect, like ESP almost. Like you read somebody else's mind. It's really like magic. So I would tell people that every story is important because somebody else, it's going to help somebody else. And you might not know how it's going to help them, but it's definitely not going to help them if you keep it inside. If you get it out there, you allow the one person maybe out there. And isn't one person enough? If you can change one person's life with your story, I mean, you don't have to write a bestseller. Just get it out there. Find the person who needs it and just get it out there.
I'm really writing my book for my daughters. And, my daughter Ellie read it over the weekend, and she just said, this is so wonderful. This is something I'll always have, and your grandchildren will read one day. So I'm a big fan, having written this book and having gone back into my family history and looking at letters that were written like in 1898 that my mom saved, and her family immigrated from Germany in the late 1800s. I really think it's important for people to understand their family history. And I wish my mom had gone around and said, showed me items like there was little baby doll with a porcelain head and and the eyes were missing, the eyes were separate, and it was sort of creepy. But I wish I had known, like, where did this come from? Who gave this to you? And I'm going to do that with my daughters. It sounds kind of morbid, but kind of show them these things because they're so much more meaningful if you understand their provenance and what they meant to the person. And otherwise, they're just stuff. And anyway, I think that's a really nice thing to do. That has nothing to do with the question I asked you. I'm sorry, Zivi. I'm kind of going off in my own.
I'm excited. Can you please come on my podcast to talk about your book? I can't wait to read your book.
Well, it's kind of scary writing a book. You put yourself out there, you tell your truth, as they say, and you feel very vulnerable. But I think I was just extremely honest about, the mistakes I made, the experiences I've had, the people I hate. My husband said I should call it People I Hate, but I said very nice title. But anyway, before we go, this is, I promise, my last question. Oh, I would love you to write a list of your favorite books of the pandemic for my newsletter, which is called Wake Up Call. I have to do a little
letter.
And this will be in Wake Up Call too, so everyone can watch what I think was fascinating conversations. Zibby, I don't know about you, but
I am fascinated by myself. No, I love talking to you.
If you could write like maybe just a list of the books that you've really loved and why, we could share them, because I have very smart followers. I always say that because it's also nice to compliment your followers, but I are, and then they can read some of the books that you've enjoyed. But before we go, can you tell me maybe the 3 books that you read that you really loved, other than Moms Don't Have Time To, a quarantine anthology edited by Zibby Owens?
I've talked a lot about Writers and Lovers by Lilly King, but I really love that book, and I read it in the middle of the pandemic, and I couldn't put it down. I read it till 2 in the morning, and it touches on so many themes. And have you read it? It's so good.
Oh, I haven't. We're going to write it down.
Yeah, right. Lilly King.
Lilly King. Okay.
It's about a woman who has just lost her mother, and then she goes out in the world. She's an aspiring author. She gets in a relationship with the guy who has kids. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's just amazing. It's really great. So sometimes I judge books a little bit by how unputdownable they are.
Yeah.
So the unputdownable books, that was one I read in the pandemic. I hate to say, like, this is so, I hate to like talk about bestseller, things that are already so popular, but I really love The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I couldn't put it down. And oh gosh, putting me on the spot here. Favorite books of the pandemic. I'm like, what did I read? Well, I have a book that I'm reading now. I'm interviewing her tomorrow, and it's so good. It's by Kristen von Agrop, and it's called, did I say that out loud? Something like Lessons from My Midlife Indignities. And it's a collection of essays about midlife. She's about probably 55, something like that. She used to be the editor of Real Simple, and it is so funny that I have laughed out loud multiple times. It's the only thing I could read when I had COVID, because my brain was like scattered, and they were short enough and funny enough that they kept my interest. So I laid there in bed like laughing. So I love that book, and I can't wait to interview her tomorrow.
Oh, fun. And what about Rodham? You have to read Rodham for Curtis.
I read Rodham. I read Prep. I read American Wife. And actually she has so she's part of this new Amazon Originals series, and has a short story in that. And it's a collection. It's with Kylie Reed and a bunch of other authors. It just came out as an Amazon Original. So I'm going to talk to her about the story in that. It came out, I think, Tuesday or sometime this week.
And I know Sarah Treem, who's writing Rodham, who's writing the series Rodham.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, so she's working on that, because I've become very Hollywood Zibby. I don't know if you know that.
Excuse me. I mean, I don't know. Although I have to say, my brother has a production company called Black Bear Pictures, and his movie is I care a lot, and Rosamund Pike just won the Golden Globe last night. So that's my adjacent Hollywood story.
I was like, I had not, there's so much content. I hadn't heard of that movie, but now I'm going to watch it. Is it on Amazon? I care a lot.
It's Netflix, and it literally just came out. What was it? Maybe 2 weeks ago.
What's it about?
It's about a woman who finds a way to make a scheme around elderly people.
Oh, that's
yeah,
she rips off elderly people. Sounds like a real heartwarming movie.
Yeah, it's not heartwarming. No, it's very dark. But my brother. Well, anyway, yeah. So,
well, tell him congratulations. That's very exciting. And Zippy, this was so fun. As I said, you guys, if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, sign up for it by going to katiecouric.com. Our motto is open it, even if you don't read it.
Good one.
All right, Zip, so nice to meet you. I hope our paths cross in New York.
Me too. I would love to see you in real life, and I definitely want to have you on my podcast when your book comes out.
Oh, that would be awesome. It comes out in October. And I had the worst time coming up with a good name. I wish that I had come up with that. Did I say that out loud?
What's the title?
What's my title?
Your title.
I'll tell you later.
Really? Okay. All right.
I'll tell you the title I wanted.
Okay.
But he gave it the thumbs down. I wanted it to be called Moxie, because my dad used to always say I had moxie.
Aww.
Moxie is a conceited word. It just means you have a lot of drive and determination and spirit. So it's not like, naming your book like hot or beautiful or something, or great, or but it's just kind of like it's like having pluck. And
Moxie.
But everyone said it was too old fashioned, so I didn't name it Moxie, but I'll tell you what I named it later. And the title's fine. It'll be fine.
Maybe could you fit Moxie in the subtitle? Like a title of Moxie or something? No, not even subtitle.
No.
All right.
But it's in the first chapter, so that's good.
Okay. Well, you got it.
I'm sharing too much. Adriana's like, anyway, so nice to meet you, Zippy. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for doing this. Thanks to Jane Rosen again for introducing us. And I'm so happy we did this.
Me too. All right, Zippy, take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.